Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
And we're back. Welcome to another episode of the Flowline. I'm here with my lovely co-host, Matt Offenbacher, with his beautiful, I don't know if it's a new shirt, but it's nice. I like it. We're on video.
Yeah.
This is new for us, but this is good. How are you doing today?
Very self-conscious. I think I have like a face for radio, as they say, but I did try and wear a nicer shirt that hopefully makes me appear to have good bone structure and muscular features. I'll let the audience decide.
Fortunately, there's editing for that, and with AI nowadays, you'll look like a rock star. It's totally fine. You actually did get a nice compliment the other day. We were educating at a client's office, and they said that you had an amazing radio voice. Did they not?
Yeah, that was weird. I mean,
because she listens to the podcast.
So like she was getting to hear the edited, optimized version anyways, which is all we're sort of known for. And so I feel like there have been occasions where I've actually like talked to somebody and been like, oh yeah, we have a podcast. And they're like, that's you? And I'm like, yeah. Can't you recognize my silky smooth voice? Maybe they're starting to line up. Like maybe I'm learning to project more because I have to speak into a microphone.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it was good though. It's nice, again, when you're educating clients or really anyone for that matter, and there's a bit of, they recognize other things that we're doing. Again, it was fun. So again, thank you for that. And for the audience that's listening in, or I guess watching at this point, again, just like the amount of information that we're continuously putting together to just further educate, I think is good. And so again, kudos to you and the team. We just came out with some tech bites, right?
Yeah.
That was awesome. So shout out to you and the team, Addie. And
let's go to the fourth wall. So Tom over there behind the camera, he's the brains behind all that.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, he sort of digested a tech tip that we done a while ago for the sort of, 30-second, get me quick kind of thing. We will have some full-length tech tips coming out. Those are all in the pipeline.
Yeah.
So we've got our act together thanks to some great help. And, once again, I'm not supposed to look over there and recognize the guy behind the camera, but hi, Tom. We're breaking all the rules from the get-go with this filming thing, but I'm up for it.
Aren't we known for disrupting things?
Man, it's who we are, right?
Yeah, no, it is. And speaking of which, again, controversial topic that always gets brought up is we've had some series in the past, the Why Matt Hates series. And so, moving on from all the things we're doing, there's things that we're doing that you don't necessarily like and you actually hate, which is a strong word, but I think it's justified. So for today, Matt, let's go ahead and dive into why you hate or dislike or really just don't appreciate the sag shoe. And for those listening who aren't familiar with the sag shoe, it has nothing to do with what's on your feet, but rather something else that may resemble the shoe. But anyway, let's hop into that. Matt, real quick, let's give a good overview and description. What is the sag shoe test?
So the sag shoe test, you're taking a sloped piece of plastic and putting it in your heat cup and turning your viscometer. And the idea is that this thing, because it's kind of got a slope to it and you're applying a little bit of shear because your viscometer spinning, is supposed to help you trend the likelihood that your fluid has sag tendencies. So it includes sort of a dynamic component because you're circulating at a relatively slow rate, aka your viscometer spinning at about 100 RPMs, and you've got that slope. So imagine a build angle, like we've talked about sag in the past, where your weight material has sort of a place to avalanche and lay in a little well. The idea is that you have your sort of mud weight before, and then you take a very long needle called a cannoli, which I always get mixed up. Cannoli, that's like, food.
Could be potato for sure. One of those.
Cannoli is this long needle, and so you'll take a syringe and extract the material that is sagged into sort of the bottom of that well, and weigh that and get an equivalent mud weight and a sag factor. And you say this is sort of the trend that we're on.
Right.
So the thing is, we're always trying to find a way to make sure we don't have sag. And so the least worst part of this is it's something that's fairly practical to adapt to existing equipment you have in the field and kind of trend things.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like high level looking at it, it's like, okay, you've described it. It seems to be something that we could use to hopefully help identify what's going on, whether you do or don't, or at least give an indicator what's, one way or another. So why is it something that you just, again, why do you not like it, and go into the details as to why? Because again, at a high level, it actually seems like something that can be quite valuable.
I mean, the reason that I really hate it is just the way we tend to extrapolate something very basic into something and interpret it as something more complex than it is. And so you think, look, if I get this delta in weight and that's a pretty practical way to acquire this data. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't disagree, except for one of the frustrating things is, of course, you got to heat up this fluid, right? Well, you've got to heat up the fluid with the shoe in it, or and we're thinking about the field, right? So in the lab, I can just throw it in an oven, or I can do whatever, and I can take the fluid, heat it up to temperature, and pour it in the cup and start my test. But normally in the field, we're trying to heat this fluid up, which means we sort of start stirring it, wait for it to get to temperature, and so we're exaggerating all of our data, right? Mm-hmm. Unless the flow line temperature is already hot enough. And so what we find is that, we've already, sometimes the sag tendency looks way worse than it really is, but it's like, well, I had to stir the fluid to get it warm enough, and, kind of here we are. So, there are sort of ways to finagle that, but we've already started off on the wrong foot.
Gotcha.
And then the other thing you're doing is you're extracting like 10 mils of fluid and weighing that and comparing it to the weight of 10 mils of fluid, which in a lab is fine, right? I have a very precise balance. I can, I've calibrated calibrated glassware, and not that I don't in the field, but I've got a whole variety of it to do my measurements. But I'm asking you to convert 10 mils to, pounds per gallon equivalent. And with a scale, the precision of a balance you need on a rig that's vibrating constantly. Yeah. When was it calibrated last? There's all these sort of frustrating questions for something that's quite sensitive to interpret. And so that, that element just really, really frustrates me, where we have folks ask for it, and then it's like, okay, well, what's the follow-up with this data? Because we don't have a problem.
Right. So you mentioned 10 mils of fluid as a sample. I mean, similar to a retort, you can go 10, 20, 50. I mean, is there scenarios where you would add more to try and get a better representation of the system? I mean 50 mils still is not anything compared to the whole system, but I mean, does that come up, or has it ever been a thing?
Well, the problem is you've only got so much size in that cup, and that well is such a small area that if you were to go bigger, you wouldn't get as representative of a sample relative to the intent of the test.
We need a bigger shoe.
And so, in the lab, let's say we're static aging, we take a whole lab barrel and we extract from the very bottom of it to look at a sag factor, at least under static conditions. So for me, I just think there's too many ways to panic relative to what I get out of it. I'm not saying it can't be run properly in the field. I'm just saying it's very difficult. And if you don't recognize that, all of a sudden we have phone calls in the middle of the night about what are we going to do about this risk that may not actually be there.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about the data. What kind of data does it provide to you?
So, I mean, it's going to give you an equivalent like delta mud weight, right? Okay. The heavier part you're converting to a mud weight, and you had your initial mud weight, which is fine. But once again, like a lot of things we talk about, it needs to be on a trend. It shouldn't be something where it's like, well, I went and ran it, and, this number's really bad, and we need to shut down and do all this stuff.
Right.
We find that normally it's like, wow, this is really deviated from the norm we're used to, and therefore we need to act. And so I think a lot of times someone will be like, what does 0.5 mean? And we're all, let's have a meeting and talk about it and all these kinds of things. And it's like, well, what was yesterday's? Did it get worse or better? Mm-hmm. What other factors associated with SAG, which, we've discussed in other episodes, are those even present? So, we've had a few situations where people have asked, and we've run them for a while, and you can tell nobody's looking at the data because the numbers arguably in their absolutes would be terrifying.
Yeah.
And I know it's artifacts of the test. So like, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's a good point. So when it comes to the data piece, though, I mean, what kind of data do you think is missing from something like this?
I mean, the biggest one in our line of work is, does the wellbore even have features for dynamic sag risk? And by that, I mean, you know, do we have a long step out where we have, you know, most of the time in unconventionals, what do? You go down and you make a hard turn, right? So you don't have a huge build section for barite to avalanche. That, you know, so like immediately a huge element of inducing sag isn't even there. You know, are we in that mud weight window where it's a high risk? You know, that 12 to 14-ish kind of pound per gallon. You know, are we circulating at very low rates?
Right.
You know, we've had a number of conversations where it's like, oh, look, you're pumping at 600 GPM at 8.5-inch hole. Like, nothing is sitting still.
Right.
Your angular velocities are just too high.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I hope we remain trained in the notion that, look, if I have to circulate through a choke, if I have to do some of these other things, especially if I have to wait up at the same time, like, that might be where we need to be on alert.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're immune to sag, but I am saying normally sag is one of those things that comes up as a suspected culprit without evidence and acts as a distraction from what's really going on.
Yeah.
So.
Got it. So, I mean, what else regarding, well, I understand what you're saying. It obviously has its limitations, but what are some actual reasons that you, if you were out there or we came up against a scenario that you'd actually suggest running this to hopefully qualify what's going on?
I think that if you are this would be a scenario base where I'm just trying to convey a message first. So I don't think you need to run it every day.
Okay.
Look, if you're drilling an S-curve well offshore with like big temperature gradient, like it is a clearly very high sag risk well. Spend the money, get the balance, use this because you don't have anything else.
Sure.
But add all the extra equipment, do all the resources, and also follow your best drilling practices so that it never happens. But from a sag tendency perspective, I think there's a couple of things. Look, if we're going to make some changes, let's say we have to wait up where we're not able to mix very well, like maybe let's get a trend there just to make sure we're not going to get into trouble. We've encountered some scenarios where they want to thin the mud prior to running casing. And we've discussed that in the past too. If you're going to add a thinner or you're going to aggressively dilute, but you still add some barite, let's do that before TD first off. And let's keep an eye on what we're doing. So it may be a data exhibit to quantify like, hey, things are getting worse.
Yeah.
Once again, I'm sending you that balance, and I'm not going to let you leave it out there and rust and break and all that. We're gonna be very focused on how we're using this, given our risk profile.
Right.
But behaviorally, here's normally what happens. Frankly, we have a sag incident, or somebody thinks we had a sag incident. Everybody panics, and so they say we need to run a sag shoot every day, and that's sort of your like basic paperwork response to an incident is, look, I did a thing, right?
Yeah.
But when really the question is, okay, fluid sag tendency is one thing, but what are the drilling practices that got you there? Because a lot of these incidents are based off of slow circulation, other activities where I want to focus on the behavior that caused it just as much as, yeah, if I need to bump up my rheology or if there's other things to mitigate that risk in concert, absolutely. But just looking at it, I find behaviorally what we do is let's run a sag shoot. That's my move on. And guess what? We don't have sag for a long time because everybody forgets about it.
Yeah. No, it's I think you brought up a great point, because I've been involved with several incidences where in an unconventional well where you're drilling laterally, your AVs are through the roof. And lo and behold, you run into a scenario where all of a sudden, oh my goodness, we're trying to wait up, we can't. And now we've got all this stuff coming across the shakers and panic, oh my goodness, there's all this, we've got sag, it's coming at us, like what's wrong? And then of course there's all this other, making these other assumptions that I'm not going to get into, but I think it's one thing is to look back at is if you've got access to Pason or any other things, it's like you have to do a full diagnostic of like the drilling practices, the mixing procedures, the properties that you're going to, because every time, and I mean, it's been countless times, but every time that there has been an assumption by someone on the rig that we have sag, it's not actually sag. It's just improper mixing. And not to go into like who and what and why, but again, the reality is it's very difficult to have actual sag in the wells that we're typically drilling, especially in unconventionals, especially with the amount of pump rate. So looking back at like the fundamentals, I think is probably something I think we need to touch on, right?
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to, is the root cause, like, sag is the problem, or settling, if you will, right? Like, let's say it is an issue where material didn't get mixed well enough and it is settling out.
Right.
And look, sometimes I've seen, if you're on well control, like, this is a scary thing. You're circulating through a choke. You're aggressively trying to wait up. It's all fresh barite. You can't circulate very fast. It's hard to mix that aggressively when you have to wait up that much. Depending on your method, you're mixing a larger volume. You're not necessarily, like, if you're waiting up the whole system, those are challenges to get a quality fluid ready to go.
Yeah.
And many of those factors are outside our control. And so, yes, we have to be on the lookout and recognize that risk. But from a mixing perspective, we've talked about this, communicating with the rig crew, where when you say add, 5 sacks an hour, they add 5 sacks and wait an hour. And your version is add 1 sack every 12 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And so we have certainly seen those miscues with the rig crew where they're, oh my gosh, we got to wait up, hammer with barite. And it's like, wait, we got other things you got a wetting agent and oil. That's counterintuitive, but like, you got to add oil to keep this stuff dispersed. And so that overreaction, then what is going on? And it's, wow, we made a situation worse.
Yeah. Well, it's, what's funny is even, and kind of adding to that is a lot of times people say, oh, they must have mixed it too fast. And I always kind of laugh because I was a rig hand. I remember, and then again, as a mud engineer too, you witness it, but physically trying to mix something through the hopper that has an orifice or a hole that's, I don't know how many few inches. Like, the reality is there's no rig that has a bulk tank with a hose tied into the top of the grating to weight up. Like, it all has to go through a hopper. And so for all the mud engineers out there, this might be a good time to say, hey, let's go check the mixing pump. Can we please make sure it's pumping adequately? Hey, let's check all the agitators, because it may have not been a mixing procedure, but there may just be some things on the rig that aren't operating at 100% efficiency, or at least efficient enough to then agitate the fluid before it goes down hole, because you can really only mix so fast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But everything else has to be working in conjunction to make sure that you don't have settling of barite because it's not being agitated properly.
And I mean, you and I know, like, we found ourselves pre-mixing heavy mud, like pre-blended heavy mud, when we know we have to do a big weight up, and just like, hey, I'm gonna use some stuff that's already in much better shape and do a liquid mix instead of just trying to hammer it, from the bulk tanks.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, pre-mix pits, when we know the mixing system stinks.
Yeah.
And we're going to be stressed. And then, I think a lot of us, when you think about mixing efficiency, we get used to dealing with what we have.
Right.
And so a lot of us this is how it is. And I think, from the office level, that's one thing that I think our customers are always looking for efficiency and eliminating waste. Like, let's make sure we have that conversation. And if they push back tomorrow, it doesn't mean, wait for a rig move or just, harp on these things where it's like, hey, we're missing out here, and there's risk and there's waste.
Yeah.
And maybe you can get something fixed. A lot of times we've been able to do that by demonstrating some of these issues.
Right.
So, hey, when you go on a rig move and you empty out the pits, and there's mountains of barite in the corners of the tanks, take pictures and say, this is what I'm talking about.
Right.
I think, and look, that may show that you have a sag-prone fluid if you do a sag shoe test or whatever, that this mixing is bad, but like, the resolution has improved the mixing. Right.
Yeah. No, and again, not to like steer this down a mixing SOP episode, but I think like they come hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the sag shoe, does it have to be hated? I mean, there's got to be some optimism or some silver lining around this test, because it's been around forever and it's still around.
I mean, with some trending, it can be helpful. I think maybe, we got to make these shorts, so why Matt hates the sag shoe. And it could be why Matt hates the sag shoe when the data is not interpreted correctly and measurements are not reliably performed. I mean, that probably doesn't fit in a LinkedIn post. So we had to go short here, but like the test doesn't tell you your behavior and everything. It helps, but it cannot operate on its own. It is one of the least worst options when you talk about like that. The API has a few different things like the sag window, but it's like I can't measure viscosity at that low shear rate with conventional equipment. So once again, I'm back to sending something out that's extra sensitive, an extra sensitive viscometer and like new equipment that people have to adjust to and everything, along with, a dedicated sort of like dynamic sag tester, which is once again another piece of equipment, blah, blah, blah. Like this is at least a plastic thing I just add to my kit.
Yeah.
But if we can recognize it as a plastic thing that I stuck in the bottom of a heat cup, I think we can do better than, oh my gosh, I got a 0.7. Now we need to, raise a bunch of alarms. Let's figure out why we have a 0.7. What is it practically? It's not what is wrong with the mud per se. Look, there could be adjustments to the mud, but it could also be, look, we're in a high risk situation here. Let's find out why, what, and so we can adjust fluid properties, but let's keep an eye on our drilling practices. Let's keep an eye on other things that may promote sag.
Yeah.
So I think that it's not, I hate it, but I don't hate it so much that I wouldn't recommend it under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
I worry that it's relied upon too heavily in the wrong way. And so I just want us to be careful and recognize it for the sloped piece of plastic it is.
No, it's a great way to sum it up. And again, too, is it's like there's behavior around this type of test, especially in an environment where there's high stress and people are freaking out, trying to figure out why you have this stuff coming across the shakers. And so, again, I think a lot of times we get in a panic situation where we don't take a moment to step back and take a deep breath and try and like look at the whole system. And so anytime you have something like that, whether it's you think it's barite coming across or whatever the case is that's happening at the rig, it's always good to take a step back, take a deep breath, look at the entire system as to like, what did we do leading up to this situation? Because a lot of times you can look on Payson and say, oh, there we go. We were circulating at 100 gallons a minute while we were trying to wait up. That probably doesn't help. So again, I think it's try not to panic, use it, understand its limitations, trend it if you have been testing it. And clearly Matt has described the rest of what needs to happen or should happen around the test. Don't throw it in the garbage. It has a purpose, but under these guidelines. With that being said, Matt, any closing last words? I mean, you summed it up quite elegantly, but anything else that popped into your mastermind there?
No, nothing popped into the old noggin there while you were talking. I think
okay, well,
we got a good summary.
Let me ask you this.
Okay.
You seem to hate a lot of different tests, which is okay.
Yeah.
Which test do you love the most?
Love the most. Man, that's a tough one.
Maybe that'll be the next episode, folks.
We'll find something I like.
In.
I'm going to have to pause and think for a while.
Okay.
And then I'll get back to you.
Sounds great. Well, with all the listeners out there, really appreciate the support. If you could share this with someone who may be experiencing a saggy shoe. It's not a TikTok dance, although maybe Tom over here can teach us one. Appreciate all the support. If you could subscribe, leave a review. For the listeners out there, it's most important to reach out, ask some questions. If you are a drilling engineer or someone on the operator side, we really encourage you to reach out with some questions. Some of our best episodes come from folks asking some really good questions and things that we may have not touched on, or maybe combining episodes due to whatever it is you have going on your rig. And again, the YouTube channel has a ton of good information. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. The AES page is where all the content comes out from all the stuff that we're putting out for educating, and just some of the great stuff that we're doing within the company organization-wise. We're part of some great programs, helping local communities. Again, just a ton of exciting stuff we're working on. With that said, everyone, be safe out there. Until next time.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of the Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.